sometimes, just sometimes, pleading guilty to something you didn't do might be better than the alternative. I'm going to explain a couple of reasons why Bryan Kohberger could have potentially pled guilty to something he didn't do, despite the fact that many of you say no person in their right mind would ever plead guilty to something they didn't do. No innocent person would do that. I would never in a million years. Let me play devil's advocate. Now, I'm not going to lay down all of the foundation for this right here, but I want to say that many of you out there are well aware that there were alternative suspects in the case of Bryan Kohberger's alleged killings in Idaho, the alleged Idaho 4. Now, I know that for you, a lot of people out there, for example, are going to say there is no way in hell at this point anyone in their right mind can think that Bryan Kohberger is innocent and just pled guilty for no reason whatsoever. After all, didn't you hear them ask, didn't you hear Hitler ask him, are you pleading guilty because you are guilty? And he said yes. Point number one, for those of you who don't understand the legal system, a plea deal is off the table if at any point you say no or hesitate in any of the actions. When a plea deal is made, it is the agreement. I'm going to ask you very point blank a series of questions. Every single question must be answered in the affirmative or the deal is off. If you hesitate, if you hem-haw, if you caveat, well, mostly that's true. The deal is 100% off. The only way a plea deal works is if everything is agreed to exactly as stated before they went into that court system. So it was no surprise in my mind when Bryan Kohberger said, yes, I'm guilty. Now, I still gasped at some level because I was thinking, wow, after all of this, it's really going to end this way. It wasn't necessarily a gasp of, oh, that means he did it. It was like, we're really going to end this trial with him going and saying, I did it all. Everything you accuse me of, I did it all. Now, at the end of the day, I agree with you. We must accept that Bryan Kohberger has confessed, or as I should say, he has pled guilty to the charges. Pleading guilty and actually being guilty, by the way, are two separate things. But yes, he did plead guilty. And some of you are out there raising holy hell that no innocent person would ever, in their right mind, plead guilty to something they didn't do. So let me give you two alternatives to explain to you. And this is just two. There are half a dozen reasons why people in America will plead guilty to things that they haven't done. And let me give you just two that are plausible if you've been paying attention at all to the alternative theories in Bryan Kohberger's case. Number one, and this is the most important one. Many people believe that there was a drug hit element to what happened in the Idaho 4 case. And again, I'm not going to lay down the foundation, but the story goes, and there's a particular YouTuber who is particularly popular in this particular area. I'm not going to even mention his name. You guys all know who it is, so we'll just leave it at that. Who has frequently mentioned the Aryan Brotherhood. Now, again, don't focus right now on all the whole, oh my God, you can't prove anything. This isn't the Aryan Brotherhood. Just hear the argument and let me explain to you a scenario in which Bryan Kohberger pleading guilty could mean nothing to do with his guilt. And let me explain why. For example, in this hypothetical situation, if two of the victims, for example, in that house had somehow been related to sending people to jail, and maybe it wasn't them, maybe it was their parents who sent other people to jail who were connected, for example, to the Aryan Brotherhood. Let's say those theories, which are out there and have been out there for over 2.5 years, let's say that there was something to it. Now, I have never been to prison, but what I have been told, and you see it all the time parodied in movies, is that when you go to prison, you better hook up with some kind of group, some kind of place that you can identify, because there's going to be the blacks, there's going to be the Mexicans, there's going to be the Aryans, there's going to be all these skinheads, there's going to be all these different groups. And if you want protection, you better get in a group, because otherwise you are a loner. You have no protection and anything can happen to you in prison. Now, I want you to imagine this potential scenario just for you to just question whether or not you can understand how sometimes pleading guilty to something that you didn't do might be better than the alternative. If, for example, and it's purely hypothetical, if, for example, the Aryan Brotherhood actually hit that house because somebody had sent Aryan brothers to prison for something and they went away for a very long time, and it affected a major operation of the Aryan Brotherhood. If there is such a thing as an Aryan Brotherhood or skinheads or white supremacists in Idaho, and I know that's a complete shock to think that there might possibly racist in Idaho, even though it's like the Mecca for white supremacists. But let's say, for example, there really is such a thing as white supremacists who live in Idaho and congregate in Idaho, and that there's like the founding of the Ku Klux Klan in Idaho, and that there's Aryan Brotherhood in Idaho. Again, putting all that fictional shit aside. If that happens and you go to prison, you're Bryan Kohberger, who, by the way, I might add, is an Aryan Nation poster boy. He is whiter than white on rice and a cup of milk and a cold cup of paper plate in a snowstorm, as fucking Major Payne said, and I screwed that up. I usually don't. I usually roll that out by a tongue with no problem. Point being is that this guy is white. He is Aryan Nation poster child, Bryan Kohberger. Now, imagine this. If the Aryan Brotherhood is who hit that house, even if Bryan Kohberger was never anywhere near it, and even there's a scenario in here which Bryan Kohberger might be somehow related in some way to somebody in the Aryan Brotherhood. But let's just take that off the table for a moment. Bryan Kohberger has nothing to do with anything. He's just there going to school. And then the Aryan Brotherhood hits that house. And now all of a sudden, Bryan Kohberger is the lead suspect. And now Bryan Kohberger's in your prison system. And you've got Aryan brothers in the prison system. Here's what you say to a Bryan Kohberger, because you got a great opportunity. Look, you're the number one suspect. If you take the fall for the Aryan Brotherhood, if you take the fall and say you did it, whether you did it or not, you will be treated well. You will have protection in prison. Nobody will touch you. You're an Aryan Nation poster boy. You are whiter than white. We will protect your ass and no one will touch you in prison. And you will live the rest of your life protected by the brothers. All you have to do is say you're guilty. The alternative, by the way, if you don't, is we will beat the living piss out of you and we will torture you and shank your ass. You will get killed and it'll be brutal. We will not be kind. You will suffer on the way out. So, opportunity of the Brotherhood. You see somebody in there, he's in prison, you've got brothers next to him, and you've got an opportunity. Look, everybody thinks you already did it. Just simply say you did it. And the alternative is, if you don't, we'll beat the living hell out of you, and it'll be a brutal murder. We'll rape you with the broomstick. We'll do horrible things to you. You will suffer if you don't take the fall. But if you do go up there and do the right thing and say you did it, you will be protected. No one will touch you in this prison system. You'll live like royalty. We will treat you really, really well because you helped our Aryan brothers get off and take the pressure off the Brotherhood. In that kind of scenario, I want to ask you if you can be a rational human being and understand for a moment that the option, even of being put to death by a firing squad, would be preferable over being beaten, tortured, maybe assaulted with broomsticks, whatever the case may happen. And I use that because that's happened. That happened to a Dahmer, I believe. So it's not just a hypothetical. That shit happens. When people brutalize people in prison, it can be literally brutal, and especially if there's a group. So you ask me, can you really honestly say that no innocent person would ever remotely, I would rather die than admit to something I didn't do? Really? What if your alternative was you're going to suffer, you're going to be beaten to a pulp, you're going to be sodomized, you're going to be brutalized, maybe you get your ass kicked on a regular basis before they finally finish you off. You will suffer. Conversely, all you have to do, and I know it's going to suck for you, is say you're guilty on the stand and make it convincing, and you'll be treated like royalty. And you'll live the rest of your life like a king behind bars. Now, I realize that sounds ridiculous to you, but I just want you to ask yourself the question. Do you not see how that might actually be the better alternative? That pleading guilty to something you didn't do and letting the whole world think you're a fucking monster and shaming your parents even. Maybe you have a private meeting, hypothetically, playing devil's advocate. Maybe you have a private meeting with your parents. Maybe you fly their ass out from Pennsylvania and you say, Mom, Dad, I didn't do this, but I'm going to get killed in prison if I don't say I did. And so I'm going to go up there and I'm going to make everybody believe it. Yes, I killed those people. Yes, I killed every single one of them. Send me away to life in prison. Because if I don't, it's going to be far worse than the firing squad for me. I'm going to be killed and it's going to be brutal. So yeah, I'm going to take that deal. If that doesn't ring possible for you, and I'm not saying it's probable, I'm not saying that's what happened in this case. I'm playing devil's advocate. It's a thought experiment. Can you see how maybe pleading guilty to something you didn't do is better than the alternative? Let's do one more scenario. Bryan Kohberger does have conspirators. They're out there on the outside. People who are they're like, you better fucking keep your mouth shut You better not rat us out. Because people have always asked this whole time, if there was conspirators, Bryan Kohberger would have said something already and walked. Well, first of all, you're a moron if you think that Bryan Kohberger would have walked by telling that there's conspirators. He was never going to walk. And if he had conspirators, he was still involved, and he's still going to get life in prison for accomplice to murder. A lot of states treat an accomplice to murder the same as murder. So he was never going to walk by presenting an alternative suspect if there was one on the outside. But let's say that individual is on the outside still and is alive. That person's already proven they're willing to butcher 4 people, brutally butcher 4 people. So you want to face that person if you rat on them? Do you want to run the risk that you're going to rat on them? They're not going to listen to you. They're not going to believe you. And basically, you know, maybe if you're lucky, you can put reasonable doubt into a juror's mind and they'll let you free. And then you got hell to pay from your conspirator who knew you just tried to put him away, that you ratted on him, that you didn't shut your effing mouth. And so it's going to go badly for you, and it's going to be far worse than the firing squad. So again, 2 scenarios in which I would argue sometimes pleading guilty to something that you didn't do might be better than the alternative. I know for many of you, you can't even imagine it. And so if you stayed this long, I appreciate you giving it some consideration. It's just a thought experiment. And again, I want to clarify for the end of the day, because this is something I need to be more and more careful about on my channel. I will admit, and I will try to do this pretty regularly, Bryan Kohberger did state on the stand that he did this crime and he did it alone. He stated that. All I'm telling you is that on the one hand, we have to accept his answer. That's the answer he gave. So I get it, and I will not fault you, America, if you decide that, look, he said it himself, I have to believe him. I get it. But by the same token, I want you to ask yourself, and don't even worry about telling me. You don't have to admit it to anybody. Keep this shit a secret. If you were facing getting sodomized by a broom and tortured in prison and having have to suffer on the way out for something you didn't do, but all you have to do is say that you did it, even though you didn't do it, and you'll be treated like royalty, would that have been a better choice for you? It's a rhetorical question. Don't answer it. I'm just playing devil's advocate. Thanks for listening.